Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. By my watch, it's just 3 o'clock. So, welcome to the first time we're meeting as a Cambridgeshire and Peterborough STP board in public. My microphone is on, but I don't think it's necessarily working, so I'm going to shout if that's all right. And I will in quite a large room here at the away end at the football ground. So if I can encourage all colleagues who are on the board to, when they're making their contribution, to project as best they can. That may be harmful to the eardrums of your immediate neighbour, but think of the greater interest, I think is what I'd say. So I'm Mike Moore, I'm the interim chair of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough STP, and as I said, this is our first meeting in public. Can I just say a couple of things about that? As far as I know, it surprised me because I think we are one of the first, or one of the early STPs in the country, so I'm told to be going public. I'm surprised at that. I thought we were perhaps behind the times, in truth, but I'm told that we were amongst the first, certainly in the east of England, to do so. The reason why we have decided it's important and right to hold our meetings in public are kind of varied, really. The first is that we are collectively around this table accountable for very significant sums today of public money. And so there is clear accountability to the public for the nature of decisions and the nature of discussions that we have about shaping the use of that money in coming years. The second reason is, and we're very much aware of this, is that if we don't meet in public, there's always a suspicion as what are these people doing behind our backs. So we recognise the truth. There has been suspicion in some parts of the country and probably also here as to what the nature of decisions are if they're being taken behind closed doors. The third reason why we think it is important to go in public is that there clearly is a very important public debate, not just amongst, so to speak, the professionals or those who manage health institutions, but also amongst communities and patients about the future shape of health and social care services in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And that public debate is a really vitally important part of that. It's also important that as we reshape particular ways of handling particular patient groups in the jargon, the patient pathway, that again we bring patient perspective and user perspective into that shaping. So that whole ethos about being open is fundamental to the kind of nature of business we're in, which is making what will be provision of health and social care services genuinely sustainable and genuinely the best they can be over the next 20, 30 years. And that's why we've seen it as important to go public. We've agreed, and I know there's some filming being taken of the event, and that is fine. We agree with that. Although, can we ask again? I think in the context of filming, if those who are filming avoid filming members of the public who are here today, because of the sense of members of the public you are watching a debate, not yourselves the subject of the filming. So I just ask for some caution by those filming not to photograph or film members of the public attending the meeting. I would also say that this is a subtle distinction here. This is a board meeting of the STP board being held in public. It isn't a public meeting, so we're not. But having said that, there is an opportunity at the end of the meeting for questions from members of the public. But and we've already had a signal of one question at least that has been raised. I will ask if it's possible. I mean, there are, I'm told, full biographies of members of the STP board available somewhere. I'm not quite sure, on the website, I guess. But I'm more than happy. But can I just suggest very quickly, and I do say very quickly, otherwise we'll spend an hour and a half doing it. just quickly explain who each of us is and the institution we come from and stuff.
So I'm Paul Marshall. I'm the sector head for the ambulance service in Cambridgeshire.
I'm James Morrow. I'm a GP and managing partner of Granta Medical Practices, a group of GP practices in South Cambridgeshire covering 44,000 patients.
I'm Paul Scott. I chair the finance group of finance directors from local government and health, and my day job is CFO of Cambridge University Hospital.
I'm Mr. Malik, the GP executive of Greater Peterborough Network, which is a GP federation that covers Greater Peterborough with a population of 270,000 in the network.
Hello, my name is Caroline Walker. I'm the Chief Executive of North West Anglia NHS Foundation Trust, and that covers Peterborough, Inchborough, and Stanford hospitals.
Hello, I'm Jan Thomas. I'm the Accountable Officer for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough CCG.
I'm Liz Rogan, Director of Public Health for Peterborough City Council and Cambridgeshire County Council.
Hello, I'm Rob Hughes. I'm Chair of North West Anglia NHS Foundation Trust, the trust that Caroline just described, which is Peterborough, Inchborough, and Stanford hospitals.
Hi, I'm Anna Bailey. I'm the Chairman of the Adult Social Care Committee at Cambridgeshire County Council. We spend the lion's share of the County Council's money.
Hi, I'm Alice Nyes. I'm Assistant Governance Manager at the Assistant
Hello, I'm Roland Sinker. I'm the Interim Accountable Officer for the STP. In my day job, I'm the Chief Executive at Adbooks in Cambridge.
Hello, I'm Wayne Fitzgerald. I'm the Deputy Leader of Peterborough City Council and the Cabinet Member for Health and Social Care. Like Anna, I spend a lot of money on Peterborough residents as well.
Hi, I'm John Moore, I'm the Chairman of Royal Baptist Hospital.
I'm Gary Houghton. I'm a GP and I'm the Clinical Chair and Chief Clinical Officer for the Cambridge and Peterborough Clinical Commissioning Group.
My name is Stephen Posey. I'm Chief Executive at Royal Baptist Hospital.
Hello, I'm Neil Moder. I'm a GP looking after 25,000 patients in Peterborough, and I'm the Chair of Greater Peterborough Network, which is a federation around Peterborough.
I'm Wendy Wellborn. I'm the Director for People and Communities across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, which includes adult social care and children's social care.
I'm Catherine Pollard and I'm the Programme Director for the STP.
I'm Guy Watkins. I'm Chief Executive of the Local Medical Committee, which is the organisation that represents GPs as providers.
Good afternoon, I'm Scott Halding. I'm the Director of Finance at Cambridgeshire and Peterborough NHS Foundation Trust, CPFT, and I'm here deputising for Tracy Dowling, our Chief Executive, who works for the public.
I'm Will Bailey. I'm one of the directors of CAMS GP Network, which is a federation of 32 GP practices in Cambridge and surrounding villages, looking after a population of over 250,000 patients.
So, thank you very much. These are colleagues of the board. We have had some apologies from Julie Spence, Tracy Dowling from CPFT, who Scott welcomed the substitution for. We've also had apologies from Gillian Beasley, the Chief Executive of the County Council and of the City Council, but Wendy and the councillor colleagues are here. And we've had apologies from Matthew Wynne and Nicholas Scrivens from from Cambridge Community Services, and from Alex Jimson, who chairs the clinical group. I can't remember. Yeah, advisory group. So we've had apologies. Shall we move on then to? So we're going to open the meeting by a focus on some of the work that we're doing here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough on PAWS prevention. So I'll hand over to colleagues to both introduce themselves and describe what they've been doing. So welcome. Apologies, everybody. I realise, as the chair, I've allowed that bit session go on 1 minute too long. It's a lot. So sorry about that.
Oh, I should have got a note.
No pressure.
Right, over to you.
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting us. We're delighted and feel privileged to be presenting our work on falls prevention and our Stronger for Longer campaign work to you at this initial meeting. My name's Angelique Margaret, and I'm a consultant in public health medicine and the Aging Well League across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. With me today, I have Helen Tunster, also from public health, who is the lead for our falls prevention program overall and drives forward the implementation, and she's going to give you a bit more detail about the program in general. Matthew Hall, who's been our comms lead across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and will talk you through a bit of the campaign. And Mary Austin, who's a local community member who's been taking part and hopefully enjoying some of our strength and balance classes, and will give you an insight into her experiences a bit later on as well. So just to give a little bit of context before I hand over to colleagues, we all know that falls is really important. We know that 1 in 3 people over the age of 65 will fall at least once in a year. We know that falls are the commonest cause of accidental injury in people over the age of 75, and that falls are also the commonest reason for unelective admission in our population over the age of 75. This has obviously got pressures for both our health and social care system, but perhaps what we know less are the intangible human costs of falls, the distress and the pain, fear, and loss of independence that people will feel when experiencing the fall, and the wider impacts that this has on families and carers. And so in response to this challenge, we drew on some really robust and effective evidence, as well as the lessons that we've learnt in our pilot in St. Ives, to develop and apply a local pathway, as well as to drive forward implementation of the broader system-wide falls prevention program that has received backing from the STP and from our local authorities. And it's not been easy. We've still got a way to go, but I really do believe that for me it's been a great example of system partnership, and also, to quote my health coach colleague Val, doing the right thing for the right people at the right time. And I'm going to let Helen tell you a little bit more about that.
Thanks, Angelique, and good afternoon, everybody. As Angelique said, I'm Helen Tunster. I'm going to give a brief overview of the STP Falls Prevention Programme, but very brief so that we can focus on the Stronger for Longer campaign, which will come later, and as a part of the overarching STP programme. So, Angelique mentioned the aim of the programme is to reduce injurious falls and improve quality of life. And we've done this by implementing an evidence-based and integrated community fall prevention pathway. So it includes 3 elements: identification, assessment, and interventions. So what we wanted to do, we wanted to ensure that there was an increase in people identified at risk of falls, in line with NICE guidance, and once identified, we wanted to make sure that they received a high-quality falls assessment, multifactorial falls assessment, with an intervention plan in place so that they could access the interventions needed to reduce their risks. So this may be things like medication reviews, strength and balance programs, vision assessments, etc. So once identified, what we also wanted to do then was get that quality intervention in place and signposting, as I've just described. So in terms of the final action, that was around strengthening system-wide integration. So with over 400 risk factors for falling, there are interdependencies with a number of pathways across the system. So we are attempting to strengthen those links to improve our response locally. Touch the laptop. So what did we do? So we successfully embedded the programme, the pathway, in the 14 engagement teams, as well as our 2 healthy lifestyle providers, Everyone Health and Solutions for Health. So largely this was done by training and supervising a large number of staff, so there were hundreds in CPFT, NHS Trust, and our 5 health trainers. This has been led by some STP funded posts, largely CPFT, and we've got some representatives here today from CPFT who've done that exceptional work and have increased the quality of the falls assessments that have been undertaken. This was enabled by processes, so IT structure was set up, we put in place a standardised assessment template, as well as a post-assessment letter that informs the patients of the risks identified and the interventions needed, as well as the GP. So none of that was in place. There was a varied process across Cambridge and Peterborough, so now we've standardised that so everyone can receive the same quality of support. We have improved the accessibility of strength and balance exercise classes. So the evidence base tells us that strength and balance is exercise is the most effective intervention we have today to reduce the rate of falls, reducing the rate of falls by up to 32%. So really, really effective. And we've done that by employing staff in CPFT as well as in Everyone Health and Solutions for Health. But we've also been working with other community partners to try and improve the number of people taking up the classes in the community. So again, we've got partners here from Huntingdonshire District Council, who we work closely with to try and increase the accessibility, availability and sustainability of those classes, as well as other colleagues in Forever Active and Vivacity. So we developed and launched the Strong for Longer campaign that we'll come on to in partnership with the colleagues I've just mentioned. And that was all about increasing the number of people attending those classes or doing exercise programs at home to reduce that risk of acute risk of falling. We made excellent progress to strengthen the system level join up and integration. So anyway, if I talk about it now, so we've made excellent progress. So what we did there, we've set up a Cambridge and Peterborough Falls Prevention Strategy Group as part of this programme, overseen by the Ageing Well Strategy Board, and we've adopted the priorities of the Falls and Fragility Practice Consensus Statement from Public Health England and the Right Care Pathway, which includes some things like action in high-risk environments such as the acute sector, which we are linking with our colleagues in Adams Hospital and have a meeting with them next week to try and strengthen those links. We've also driven forward some work with care homes, so linking with the CCG care homes colleague to scope out what's in place locally and what can be done to effectively reduce falls in care homes. Again, we're working with our CCG GP falls lead to have a look at primary care, how can we strengthen the links and efficiency across that pathway. We're also doing work with our council colleagues. So our colleague in charge of Peterborough has done a gap analysis of housing, home hazard and improvement assessments, so that we can have a look what's missing, how can we improve that pathway. And again, strength and balance work I've already mentioned, closely working with our colleagues and key providers. Yeah, so I've mentioned that we've already delivered that implementation of the pathway widely across Cambridge and Peterborough. That's in place all the way across now, as of September 2018. This has led to the identification of many, many people. So over 4,500 people have been identified. And of those 4,500 people identified, 2,500 really have had an assessment and now have an intervention plan in place to address those risk factors, which may be underlying causes of falls, it may be medication review, maybe problems with their balance of gait or their vision, etc. There's 15 risk factors that are assessed as part of that assessment and addressed. So the interventions are in place, and one of the ones that we do have numbers for is the Strength and Balance Exercise Programme. So we know 750 people have received a part of the programme and are working with our colleagues in Everyone Health and Solutions for Health, as well as CPFT, to reduce that risk factor of falling, receive that motivation and support. Thank you, Matthew. So I just wanted to finish with a case study really to talk about a gentleman who has received support from Everyone Health, so we can show the benefits that people in the community are receiving. So this is Michael from Ely. He accessed the Everyone Health Falls Prevention Health Training Service last March. He had his mobility been decreasing over recent years as a result of a stroke and a heart attack, and he was signposted to the service by colleagues in the physiotherapy department because they noticed poor balance and he reported falls. So after visiting the service, he had a multifactorial risk assessment which indicated the need for medication review and as well as home adaptations. So he saw Age UK for those adaptations at the home, and he also had a home strength and balance program set up. So 6 months after that, he received 6 monthly appointments with the Falls Prevention Health Training Service, who monitored the exercise program and progressed and challenged him to increase that strength and balance. At the end of that program, Michael saw a wealth of benefit for himself. So his strength and balance was improved. He talked about the things that he could do in life. So he could do more around the house more easily. He could now walk without his walking stick, apart from when he needed to go on long walks. And he also reported that when he, every morning he's now going up a very steep hill outside of his house to go and get the newspaper for himself and a neighbour, something which he could not do before this programme, so he hasn't done that for years. So a very real manifestation of what has happened. So some of the things he said was, you know, everyone can see the difference it has made in me. He's feeling fitter, healthier, physically and mentally, and he says that he's most surprised with the confidence that he has gained as a result of that 6-month support. So yes, just a real positive demonstration of the real impact the STP Falls Prevention Programme is having on people, real people. Thank you very much. I'd just like to pass over to Matthew Hall to talk about the campaign.
Hi there. So, this is going to be the story of the campaign and what we did to develop Stronger for Longer. It's a sort of unique opportunity for us to understand local audiences and what would resonate with them around falls prevention and strength and balance classes to make that behaviour change. So, before we start, I'd just like to play you this animation that we put together, which we shared with local audiences through social media. Hopefully it works.
It's been proved that strength and balance exercises can help us enjoy the things that we like to do for longer. Over the age of 40, and as we get older, our strength begins to decline, which can increase our risk of falling. By doing group or home-based exercise programs twice a week, we can reduce the risk of falling by around 30%. This means we can continue doing the things we enjoy for longer. So why not take our Strength and Balance challenge and see how you get on? Part 1. Strength. Test your strength with our chair challenge. Sit tall near the front of the chair. Place your feet slightly back and hip width apart. Stand up and sit down as many times as you can in 30 seconds without using your arms to help. Stop when you reach 30 seconds or when you need to. You can rest as many times as you need. How many times did you manage to stand and sit in 30 seconds? The average number of sit to stands is approximately 17 times for a 60-year-old, 15 times for a 70-year-old, and 11 times for an 80-year-old. Now for part 2, balance. Stand tall with your arms by your sides. Take 1 foot off the floor and start counting. Stop when you count to 30. Need to put your foot down. Need to grab a support. Need to brace one leg against the other. Did you manage to keep your balance for 30 seconds? If you found that difficult, you might want to think about strength and balance exercises. For more information on how you can stay stronger for longer, visit our website where you can find local classes and home-based activities. Stay stronger for longer.
So we know that some people got quite competitive about that, including my own dad actually, who's 81, and said he could do it to the ability of a 65-year-old. He was very proud, made that point to me as well. That was shared over 2,000, or viewed over 2,000 times. And I'll show you some of the engagement that inspired later and some of the other social media as well. But the sort of key message that we developed from this, and also which became our sort of statement for the campaign, was Stronger for Longer aims to encourage older people to take up strength and balance exercises at least twice a week to prevent falls and keep doing the things they enjoy. So, move on there. Operating with the animation. Let's just go down to produce the slider. Okay. So, this was a unique opportunity for us to look at strength and balance promotion and marketing. And one of the key things that we wanted to do, was to work on targeting messages and working and understanding what audiences wanted. So we started looking at some of the studies that are out there that have been done, and there were some key themes that started to come out, particularly around aspirational values and how they link to what older people wanted out of strength and balance and falls prevention. And some of these keywords and themes include they want to keep being social, being youthful, energetic, independent and resilient, that's another key one, having a better appearance. And one of the key barriers that they felt around a lot of fall prevention campaigns is never to mention the F word, which is actually an Age UK campaign, and that's the don't mention falls in your promotion. So that was one of those are the sorts of key themes that were around. Yes, working. Brilliant. So we took that information and that sort of those studies and those themes, and we worked closely with a set of partners that you can see up there to put together a creative brief and some visual concepts, working with a designer. And the initial ones include these posters here. So you can see a range of different ones. Some aspirational images, some are based around sort of pragmatic, functional tasks like getting out of chairs and doing household domestic tasks as well, and lots of different types of messaging that came out. It was really that sort of panel that we worked with local experts was really interesting because they brought such enthusiasm and passion to it, and their insight was actually valuable as well. So we wanted to make sure that this also was tested on sort of the real experts out there, which is the local communities, just make sure that we are actually working on the right premise and we are approaching this in the right way. So we took it out to local groups of older people, effectively focus groups really, and worked with Health Watch Cambridgeshire to test the ideas and concepts. And they largely confirmed what we found in our sort of review of the studies. Their key motivations were all aspirational. They wanted to keep doing things like shopping and socialising with friends, gardening and those kinds of hobbies, but the big one was playing with grandchildren. There was others as well, but those, like walking the dog and meeting people, but these are the key ones that really came out. And there was lots of detail that came out of those groups, so even down to the words we were using. So originally we had this strap line called "Keep Doing the Things You Love," but they really didn't like the word love. They wanted to change it to enjoy because that was much more resonant for their generation. They also rejected the sort of pragmatic images you can see. They didn't want to be associated with anything that made them feel old, or to have age mentioned in the posters as well. It was very much about how they could use strength and balance to remain youthful. So some of the feedback we also got was around sort of channels, the modes which were used to actually communicate with them. And it turned out really what they wanted was stuff that was very local to them. It was about a place that was trusted and credible. So they wanted it in their local newsletters, on parish notice boards, in local libraries, GPs and physios, in the local newspapers, on Look East and ITV Anglia, those regional broadcasters. But also, surprisingly, some of them use social media as well. And a bit of research showed over 40,000 across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough were actually using Facebook. So this is an integrated campaign. So we had telephone numbers that people could phone, but also we wanted to drive them towards our web resources. So we used Be Well and our Healthy Cambridgeshire, Healthy Peterborough brands online to actually store information. If I just go down a page, I can actually show you some. I've lost the control. That's not. Okay. So you can start to see. So this is our Be Well website, and this is our Strong for Longer page, and you can see some of the sort of calls to action we have at the top. So there's some around finding courses near you. There's one about doing strength and balance home-based exercises, and the download you can have that. And also you can phone or you can get in touch with a falls prevention programme as well on there. And we had other resources on here as well. So we had case studies and the animation we showed you before. We had sort of meet the tutors and what to expect from a class, as well as actually some of the exercises as well that you could look. And we know that we had quite a few thousand views of this page back in the campaign. And of course now I'm absolutely stuck because before I go back. Okay. Yeah, I'm trying that one. Yeah, sorry, just looking at that. Let's go back to the great. Yeah, okay. So the initial results from this were we produced a toolkit which we shared across lots and lots of different partners. We know we've got 2 features onto Look East, using case studies to give a human interest angle, which that's the sort of thing they want. Features on Radio Cambridgeshire. We also reached out across social media, but we think those numbers are high because we have other partners and community organisations sharing it as well. And we've got some of the ideas and some of the numbers there. So at least 600 downloads of the exercise leaflet as well. So just as we move on to sort of just show you this final part, which shows you some of the engagement we had on social media as well. So that will open up. There you go. So you've got where people are actually coming on and asking questions, and we're responding and replying to those questions. But actually quite a nice comment at the end that there's a lady here that thinks it's a good idea. She hopes other councils do it as well. So I'll just leave it there, but also just introduce Mary, who's going to tell you her experience of strength and balance classes.
Hello everybody, my name's Mary Austin. I'm 72 and I'm a retired PE teacher. I went into Hinchinbrook for a replacement knee operation, had a stroke afterwards and thought that was it. My life was in a wheelchair. It was a long time before I thought, you've got to do something, Mary, about this, because you can't be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. So I started with a physio and then progressed to the classes twice a week, once in Huntingdon, once at the Ivo, and I enjoyed them. They're good fun, and we all get on well. The point about having the exercises at home, you do them on your own. It wasn't much fun after a while, so I decided the classes were the best thing to do. So off I went, had a good time, and I'm still having a good time. And I think this is the way forward with most people, and especially with my friends who have not been able to access classes where they live, in Cornwall and places, and think I'm very, very lucky to have classes near to me. So I've thought, well, am I going to be able to live my life after this operation? Yes, I am. I do absolutely everything I used to do. I go abroad, I go on the trains, I go to Scotland, I go to the Amdrams, I perform, and I'm doing everything I did before, except I'm not skiing anymore. No, and perhaps I would not have done that anyway at my age, but those are the sort of things that I like doing, and I do, and I enjoy it very much. So, yeah, this is me. I've been on the television, I'm famous, and yeah, and I've performed on television, So yeah, I'm very proud of what's been given to me, proud that I've taken part in all these classes available. The St Ives class is now fully booked. We can't get any more people in, but they can't take another class because we all like to be together. So we like to stay together. There's this friendship. We're having mince pies at Christmas. So that is part and parcel of it. It's okay doing these things at home, but what I'm trying to say to you, we need the classes where people can come, they can join in and enjoy an afternoon or a morning all together. So yes, that's how I would like these classes and stay stronger for longer to progress. Thank you.
Just to sum up, I wanted to take this moment just to say I'm really incredibly proud of the team and to thank them as well for Helen, her dedication and her leadership to driving the work forward, to Matthew for his creativity and surviving amongst a room full of left brain people, to our fantastic colleagues at CPFT, Helen's here, and to our district's Joe's here for actually making things happen on the ground. And to the wider system as well for your support, because I really think without it, it wouldn't have happened, and really for having brought this program to life. And I think fundamentally for us, it's what we said at the beginning, it's about getting it right for our local communities. And for that we need your ongoing help and your ongoing support. So thank you so much, I hope you enjoyed that.
Thank you very much indeed for a very helpful and very thought-provoking presentation, and clearly the energy and enthusiasm of the team and patients, or not patients, but those who participants has been is very, very positive. So thank you for the presentation. We have overrun, but I think it's well, just a couple of, if there are any couple of questions, I think if anyone has of the team with regard to what that provoked in them, Will.
So I was just wondering what the next steps are for the programme.
So the next steps. So it is definitely about system-wide integration and coordination. For me, anyway, for my role, so linking up. There's plenty of work to be done across sectors and organisations. So some of the work I mentioned there, it's systematically going through each of them and strengthening those so we deal with work. And then there's plenty to be done around the strength of balance. On the referral pathway to strengthen that, to make the offer, to increase the offer that's available and make it sustainable.
And so on sustainability, how long is it funded for currently?
So the STP was a one-year programme. The public health BCF element, better care fund element was 2 years this term. So we've just submitted our evaluation reports to the SDU. So our interim discussions about future funding.
Right, just can I ask one wrong? So I know there's lots of Cambridge banner council imagery, which I might have just missed, but what is the, I didn't hear about Peterborough or the hospitals, so is there any, what's the plan for this part?
Yeah, so we're working closely with Peterborough as well, so it is across the piece. I think, yeah, the campaign is potentially more visible in Cambridgeshire from what we've demonstrated today with the website, the PUL website, etc. But yeah, it's across the board, and we're working with Peterborough City Hospital. So we've got a meeting next week with Andrew Brooks Hospital. We'll replicate that with Peterborough and our colleagues there, the geriatricians. So we've got the links there.
That's the answer. That's all I need. Thank you.
Paul, I said 2 questions. Let's go for the third.
Okay, sorry. I'd like to say thank you very much for showing that, and thank you, Mary, for a very inspiring story of success. So from the ambulance service perspective, we go to 50% of our calls are forwarders. So I'd be very interested to make sure that our forwards referrals are coming through to you, and ensure that we've got those leaflets as well to get out, and so maybe something to pick up afterwards rather than a question.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Okay, fine. Well, look, thank you very much indeed. That's been really helpful. Can I just one piece of technical advice? Should we hold the meeting standing up? No. All right. Thank you very much indeed, and it's really helpful. Thank you. Right. So we'll move on then to our papers on the agenda. we've structured the agenda in terms of short-term, medium-term and other matters. That's deliberate, and indeed it's a way we're thinking systematically through the STP, because in a sense as a partnership we're dealing with issues for short-term, where working in partnership is essential to addressing the questions like delayed transfers, like emergency pathways, good examples. At the same time as remodelling and rethinking and refashioning what will be there for the longer term. If we only dwell with the short term, then we won't solve some of the problems even in the short term. But so we need to do both simultaneously. But we've so set the agenda in that way. So we're going to hand over first, I think, Caroline on behalf of Caroline herself and Sam to just let us know where we are in the emergency pathway performance, because that is a fundamental challenge across all parts.
Thank you, Mike. Happy to present to the STP board for noting really paper 2.1. This is a record of the A&E performance of the system. I'm presenting this along with Sam here because we chair the A&E delivery boards. There are two within the patch. The paper records the position as it stands and has two separate extracts for each hospital trust. Northumbria and Cambridge. So it records some progress, it records some improvement in our performance against the 4-hour target. The 4-hour target being a proxy for patient safety and experience in our ED departments, if you remember that, rather than the outcome. The outcome is a better experience and safety for our patients. So we've seen some improvement with the improvement plans that both hospital trusts have had. There's a long way to go. What the paper records is the position and the actions we're taking to make the improvements sustainable, and it does record the fact that activity is growing and that there's a step change increase in activity on both sides within this. What it doesn't do for the Peterborough site is include a minor injuries unit, so we picked this up at the AD delivery board. In the Addenbrooke site it includes minor injuries. For the patch or the system, the AD boards represent a system, and if we were to add minor injuries unit into this, which we do for Peterborough site, it adds 40,000 more attendances on, just to give the quantum of the attendances that we're doing within that. So it's for the board to note. I think there's a long way to go to make this, and we've got to face the challenges that winter will bring. But I think we're all working together, the AIM board, to bring together everybody who has to contribute to doing this. It's not about inside the ED departments to deliver this improvement, it's about inside and around, and everybody contributing to delivering it.
Thank you, Catherine. That's very helpful. So, any questions, challenges, or observations from colleagues on that?
So Caroline, thank you very much. I wondered if you could talk a little about any of the learning that we've been able to share between the emergency departments across the patch.
So I think we do that through our partners who attend both, don't we? And we have our regulators at the meeting as well, and we have various people who come to support us and help us, the improvement directors or the emergency care team from NHSI and NHS EU come to support us as well. So I think we're sharing learning on that. Ambulance handovers, we're sharing learning. Certainly Paul and his team have shared learning on how at Addenbrooke you do a better handover of the patients, and we're trying to learn from that on the Peterborough site specifically. It's not possible on the Cambridgeshire site because of the space. So we're learning and trying to share things like that on things. The geography and the size of each department affects some of the learning, but the best practice and flow and things, and ambulance handovers, there's definitely learning from that.
Thank you.
Could I ask about the national target chart in your presentation? What does this relate to? It talks about, I mean, it's interesting to see all this breach now. It says that there's almost 2/3 is due to delayed scene review, delayed medical assessment, which suggests that we can't get our doctors to the patients in time. Is that the national picture, or is that a picture that's reflected in our hospitals? And then when I look at the element in the text further down, it does talk about the trust. So this is not related, Caroline or Roland?
That's CUH's vision.
So would that be similar for Peterborough? So
it's a different shape of the pie, but we both do breach analysis and categorise that one.
So speaking for Caroline and I, in our hospital capacity, this is a reflection of a national issue, which is large hospitals typically have to work quite hard to ensure that we always get a timely response from specialist teams into the emergency department. And that is often because they are busy in theatre or busy on the wards. So a lot of what has been going on in Peterborough, Huntingdon and in Cambridge has been ensuring that we have enough doctors and experts available to get down to the emergency department quickly. But Rob, I think the lion's share of this relates to our difficulty when the department becomes very overcrowded in any of our sites, and we're then unable to get our teams to those patients as quickly as we would like.
And we do this through something we call internal professional standards, so which dictate when the specialists have to come down, but as Roland said, at peak times or when they're in surgery, it's difficult for them to comply with those internal professional standards to get to the patients.
I think it's probably fair to point the internal professional standards on page 8 of the pack on the right-hand side. Some of those percentages are worryingly low. I mean, way below where we would want them to be. I've got a sense of how that's changing itself. It's very easy to get fixated on the 4-hour target without breaking it down into the component parts.
Well, I think that comes from me saying the 4-hour target is a proxy for great performance on internal professional standards, safety, experience, flow, ambulance handovers, and admission avoidance and attendance avoidance. So it's a proxy for all of those things that contribute and are ingredients to that performance. We all monitor internal professional standards.
Okay, Wendy and then Wayne.
Yeah, I was just wondering, in terms of the reported increase in the emissions, whether it be worth just doing a little bit of work to see if there's any particular trend or reason why that might be, whether we can take that away just as an action, just to see if there is there anything, you know, that's coming up we haven't seen before that we could look at, see if we could do any preventative stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so I think you all recognise that absolutely. So let's formally register that then. Wayne and then Stephen.
I'll come from this from a completely non-clinical, non-medical background, and I'm more concerned about what it all means for patients. You will know, or Rob will know, and members of the hospital board, I'm not a fan of targets because I think they're unrealistic. They put pressure on people in the health service to meet targets for the sake of meeting targets. Because if you happen to go to A&E one day in winter where there are more sick people than there were the week before, providing that it's a safe and people are being triaged in order of their severity, some other people with a broken finger will quite frankly have to wait. Because that's reality. People and the public's expectation of what the medical profession, particularly in the acute sector, will deliver, in my view, is not realistic. And I know it goes perhaps against government policy, but I'm not a fan of the A&E targets. What I'm actually concerned about, or what the public would be concerned about, is their mum, their granny, their uncle, their son, their daughter, safe when they go to A&E. That's really what it's about. And I think that's the reassurance, and I'm pretty confident that what is on offer, certainly in Peterborough I can speak about, and I think that's what we should be saying. Yes, it's challenging, but I think also the fact is demand is outstripping resources. It's as simple as that. But I know in Peterborough we've got some additional resource going into A&E at the hospital, and I'm trying to fathom out, is it a question of, when we talk about getting the doctors to the front line, is it that there aren't enough of them? Or is it being poorly managed? Or actually, no, it's all good, but demand is what's causing the delay. And if we're triaging that demand in order of priority, so that people are safe, because you hear these horror stories about people being left in corridors, etc., that is unacceptable. But I think we need some reassurance that whilst the target may be short, people are actually safe when they visit our hospitals.
Caroline, any observations on that?
I agree with you, Wayne, and you might not like the target, but it is a good proxy for treating the patient within 4 hours.
We should always aspire to do our very, very, very best, but sometimes they are unrealistic.
In terms of peak surges and things like that, I mean, the answer to your question is all of the things you've mentioned are what we need to do. We need to do all of the things. We need to get doctors to come down more. It's a combination of not having enough doctors some days, but having enough doctors, but then being preoccupied with very sick patients on wards. So it's not as if they're sat there just not doing ED, they're busy doing their own clinical workload.
And I suppose part of it is that the obsession with targets for their own sake.
Yes.
But some of the construction of some of those targets is built around what would constitute safety. In other words,
I get that.
Thinking cancer treatment target times is fundamentally driven about what would be.
But that's about prioritising. I'm sure we do that in emergency departments as well. People sometimes don't get that there are seriously, you know, if you go in there with blood spurting out of you or you're having a heart attack, as I had, I want to be seen now. The fellow with the broken finger can frankly wait.
Stephen and then James, and then I think we'll move on to the next round.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This was really just taking on board Caroline's comment regarding all partners have a role here. And I just wanted to mention that 2 months of our new rapid extended pathway.
Could you speak up a little bit?
Yes, of course, yeah. So what I was referring to Caroline's comment earlier about all partners having a role here in the emergency department target. So some months ago, the STP made a decision to launch a new rapid extended pathway. That's been live now for a couple of months, and 50 patients have benefited from that. So essentially complex patients who are being transferred directly to Royal Papworth or from emergency departments, thus alleviating pressure. So I think it's something I just wanted to mention that the STP has done. It is making a contribution. I think those numbers will grow. So Wayne there mentioned heart attack patients, and we have a tangible example.
Okay, thank you, Steve. James.
Thank you, Chair. We obviously have the national targets and reporting against those. I think the two comments really. One is that would it be useful for us as an STP to have some patient-reported measures alongside the national targets to reflect Wayne's concerns about what those using the service think of it as well against the national benchmarks. And I think secondly, the other issue is that a cliff edge target doesn't reflect the majority of the experience going through. So would it be useful for us alongside national targets to report the mean weight in the ED departments alongside the 4-hour weight? So we actually have a broader feeling both of individual experience and the average experience as well as the cliff edge reporting.
I agree.
So I think I get a positive sense of both those suggestions and a recognition also of Wendy's earlier comment in regard to the volume data and understanding why there is an increased presentation, because unless we understand why, we will always not be sure that what we're doing to address it is either sustainable or actually tackling the right issue. So, and I know there's been work undertaken on that, but that's bringing that more fully to us, our attention. Colleagues content with that? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Caroline, and through you, Sam, as well. Should we move on then to delayed transfers? Jan?
Yeah, so delayed transfers of care is obviously one of our key priority areas, and you'll have seen from the papers that there are a number of different actions in place on a new and revised programme to address the issues. But there's a couple of things that we need to just kind of, I think, call out on this in quite a transparent way, is that the national target on this, I'm slightly worried about mentioning national targets now, but the national target on this one is 3.5%. If we think about that in terms of where we are now, on average, Addenbrooke sits between 7 and 8%. If we think about Hinchinbrook, between 8 and 10%, between Peterborough 4 to 6%. And interestingly, for the community provider CPFT, who we don't usually talk about in this, there sits usually on a range between 10 and 14%. And let's think about that in terms of patient numbers. So for Addenbrooke's, that's 60 to 70 people. At Hinchinbrook, 10 to 20 people. And at PCH, 30 to 40 people on any given day. That we are trying to make sure that we give them much quicker access back to their own homes than they've had before. And we're doing this and reviving the programme at a time where we're going into winter again. It comes every year, we're going into it, and it's the preparation we've done before that. So there's a number of just key things that this whole programme is trying to readdress. The first one is have we got the basics right on the operational delivery? So are we doing the discharge planning in a way that we should be doing the discharge planning? So are we doing that enough in advance when somebody enters one of the hospitals to make sure that we can discharge them as effectively as quickly as possible? The second bit is then are the pathways, so are the exits out of the hospital clear? And we think they're a bit murky at the moment, so there are options for people going down multiple different ways
and we need to make that a lot clearer. So are we doing what we would call a discharge to assess programme, so getting them out of hospital as quickly as possible, and then being able to reassess pretty quickly when they go out. So we haven't got that where that needs to be, so that's the second area of focus. And when we do try and get them out quickly, we need to make sure we've got the right capacity out there to deliver care both in patients' homes and in residential homes and in nursing homes. And again, we're not clear that we've got enough capacity out there, and we're not sure that there is enough capacity out there, and they are two different things that we are trying to address. We need to get much better, and I think it's really interesting when we talk about the professional standards and the KPIs for the delays for A&E. We've started to introduce professional standards now in the detox. So how many patients are getting notifications of discharges and assessments for discharges at a reasonable distance apart. So we're actually able to measure those professional standards and how we're doing that across the sites. And we're just trying to get those systems and processes in place right now. And then lastly, we've then got to look at, well, what next? So we've talked again in Health and Care Executive about, so if we can do all of those transactional areas, but actually what role could we ask our GP colleagues to play in working with their patients, not only when they are out of the hospital, but in the hospital as well. And that's kind of the future where we really need to be getting to, is pulling patients out in a supportive way a lot more quickly by involving primary care a lot more. That isn't something that we're at. So the detox programme has had a lot of transformation. It's now incredibly focused. You'll see in the attachments, we've got detailed project plans, and we're very transparent in saying where we are and where we aren't against it. But I don't think we can hide from the challenges of the operational delivery. We have to get it right. We have to get clear and agreed pathways for patients. We've got to get the capacity absolutely right. We've got to be very clear on what's happening on those professional standards, and then we've got to kind of evolve ready for next year again through those new models.
Thank you very much, Shan. That's very helpful in a really deeply challenging area, both in the short term in terms of managing it day by day across a whole range of people, but also in terms of the longer term underlying drivers of why we find it so difficult. Wendy?
So I think one of the things we've all recognised is the fragility of the market in terms of domiciliary care and how we can't just rely on that. So I think we have talked in health executive about having other things. So definitely increase reopening services, but equally we need to look at what else we can put in place, because I don't think we can just rely on what we've always relied on. We need to think of different things. You know, that the strengthening forward programmes is fantastic in terms of another service that can actually support people who come out of hospital. So I just think we've got to think much more creatively about what people need when they leave hospital. It cannot just be focused on domiciliary care. I mean, you all know last week, we've had massive changes around big providers and gone there where they continue providing it. So I think we do need to keep being focused on doing other things and working with our local communities to see what they can do.
Thank you, Wendy. Can I bring in Anna, Wayne, and then I'll bring in Rob?
Thank you. It's just worth mentioning the peer review that we recently went through. I was involved in it, and it was heavily focused on detox, and I don't think there were too many surprises that came out of that, but nonetheless it was fairly strong on what we needed to do and how we need to grapple with this situation. And from Cambridgeshire County Council's point of view, I think we've got a really good understanding of where we're at. We've put huge resource into trying to deal with capacity issues around reablement, and we've had a very successful reablement recruitment campaign run by our comms team in the County Council, which has done things very differently and made it much more easy to apply and made it a more human and less bureaucratic process, which I think we should be really proud of. It just shows that there is a workforce out there to be got hold of if you do things differently. And I really welcome the paperwork, the emphasis on the last 30 days and the next 30 days. I think that's really helpful and makes it meaningful. I think from County Council's point of view, the joint brokerage function is really important, and we need to ramp that up and make it reality.
We've had a long concern in the Adults Committee at Cambridgeshire around the continuing health care backlog. We had a paper just at the last meeting where there seemed to be a good level of confidence that we're going to deal with that backlog by sort of February next year, which is really encouraging. But then it's about keeping to some decent timescales on getting through assessments and so on. Really what I just wanted to say is I think it was the meeting before this one, before this one, where I asked everybody to put their hands up about levels of confidence about whether we were going to hit our 3.5% detox target, and it was pretty underwhelming. And I think we've got I feel a lot more confident in terms of the paperwork that I'm looking at now, that we're really taking this seriously. And what we've got to make sure is that is disseminating out there in all of our organisations, because it's one thing around this table, but it's out there that makes this reality. And I would just love to know what the I'm not going to make people put their hands up, but what the level of confidence is now amongst people, because this 3.5% target is, if we don't get this right, we're not doing prevention, and what we've got to do is get upstream and do prevention well in order to get into this target.
Jan, do you want to put your hand up and get a sense? No, you're a kind of where you think everybody feels they are.
I thought we could do it in the style of the Falls, where we stand up without grabbing our chairs. That might be more interesting. But I think that there isn't. I think we've got growing grip on the operational issues and the standards we need to have, which I think is allowing us to grow in confidence that some of those issues that were maybe at the forefront of our minds that needed to be are now there. We are really concerned in how together we work to make sure that we are prescribing the right levels of care, and that we can actually all provide that care outside of hospitals in a timely manner. And that is the biggest challenge here with this programme. That said, I think the teams are getting more confident that actually we will make a difference. Of course, the trouble is it's easy getting there, then you've got to stay there and continue to improve on it. And that's what patients need us to do. So getting there, I think, is there.
Wayne. I could pick up where Anna left off, because we share some of the same thoughts, but again, it's a very complex issue. We have now the moment today, and what Anna alluded to in terms of the future, which has got to be a fundamental shift in terms of where the NHS funding goes to, in terms of stopping people going into hospital in the first place. And we have far too many people being referred unnecessarily because we're not intervening at an earlier stage at a community level. I think we all know that, but I'm saying it for the benefit of perhaps those that don't. We have a broken health and social care funding model in this country that is unsustainable. It cannot go on. So we must all do our best and lobby politicians to make those changes, and I'm hoping that some good news will come with the Green Paper, particularly on social care and that 10-year NHS plan. There's been lots more money going in, but it's a complicated issue. Our immigration policies as a country are wrong. We're preventing people that we need to come and work here, not necessarily from the EU, but elsewhere, that can come and work in our health and social care services, because at the moment we will never have enough people in the pond we're fishing in to fill, for example, the 100,000 vacancies that we've got in care workers alone at the moment. So it is a difficult thing, but Wendy spoke about reablement and all the other things. These are short-term, quick fixes, but even that is not going to solve the problem in terms of fixing these funding gaps. We're under pressure, and I know the county council is as well, but local government has managed its social care problems in the last, shall we say, 10 years admirably, because we cannot overspend. We're not allowed to overspend. We have to have a balanced budget. So I'm fully supportive of all the initiatives that are going on at all levels across partners here today. And I would say, yes, there is a tendency, it's perverse, to get people out of hospital quickly, to over-prescribe in terms of domiciliary care or packages, because the pressure is on the acute or through the CCG to get people out of that bed because it costs more. And it seems to me that's what's driving the issue, not what's necessarily best for the person. on many occasions. But we do not have enough domiciliary care workers. It's a fact when you can go on the till at little and earn more than we are paying people who are working as care workers. It's never going to work. And we need fundamental change. I don't care whether it's hypothecated tax or whatever it is. This, and again, it comes back to expectation, what people expect from whether it's the council or their doctors or their hospital is way out of kilter with the funding. And by the way, I'm not saying open checkbook. People should spend money wisely, but you know, it comes to the fact that enough is enough is that expression, and we cannot continue with this broken system of health and social care funding. Sorry for a second.
Thank you then. That's all relevant. Rob, then Roland. So couple of things. Just in terms of information you shared, was that on for Peter? Was that for Cambridge CCG or the whole hospitals? I think there's another seat sort of includes Lincolnshire. Okay, so thank you for clarifying that. So in terms of importance, then I think if you read through the A&E paper, you read through the finance paper later on, you will see that detox is in lots of papers that we need to fix. So I'm really pleased at STP we are going to face into this because we've been trying to face this for quite some time now. So I think I'd urge from an STP point of view, we've got this word called assure, then we need to, I think, keep hold of this and work with this. And I think, you know, when I hear my colleague and friend and governor and all those things,
don't talk about the drinking,
support, you know, giving the perspective from, you know, the outside the hospital. I think that's how we address it. So I think as one of the biggest actions today, we need to make sure that we don't let this one go, and we do all we can to sort of say. So I didn't see in the paper what the trajectory is, but I think we need to understand when we're going to get to 3.5, etc. So that's the last thing I'd say is that it just looks ever so complicated. If you remember the public, I mean, to get someone from a hospital to home again, and I look at all the organisational structures we've got, all the working parties, the number of actions that are taken, my plea is that within that group, there's a great opportunity just to streamline the whole thing, because I think we've all got friends, relatives that have been waiting in a bay to get out. And you know, his father-in-law, he was waiting, not in this region, thank goodness, but they were going to build a new stem for the guy before he could get home. And so we've got to really sort of simplify it. So that's my soapbox. I'll get back on it. But this is one of the biggest projects I think that will help us enormously. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. So a big thank you to Jan, Wendy, Caroline and colleagues at CUH Danbrooks for all the work that's gone into getting to this stage of the plan. And Jan, you're clearly here with other colleagues working on what can be improved in the hospital, what can be improved out of the hospital, how do we work better within the partnership between those different players. If you could have just one or two things from this board, where do you need help? Where do you need additional support?
Yeah, so Christmas has come early. So I think there's a couple of things, which is we do need to keep the focus on this day in, day out. It is such hard work that when, you know, we can't ebb and flow into it. So the commitment from us as the executive leads needs to be there and be there consistently, and the support for the teams, because, you know, when something is this high pressure, this consistently, we need to keep making sure we're invigorating it. So the first thing for the board is for all of us to go back, I think, to our organisations and make sure we're keeping the pressure and the support on the staff that are doing it, and let us hold us to account to make sure that we are kind of showing up and being present and driving that forward. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is that how as a board are we really going to support this capacity issue, and how do we talk about this in a balanced way for what's going on in the hospitals as well as what's going on outside of the hospitals. And we need to make sure that we've got balance on that and getting real clarity over that, the capacity that is outside of hospitals. And I'm not just talking about dom care, actually, I'm talking in that wider sense, making the best use of the resources we have at CPFT got basically is going to be really important. So that's probably the two things I would ask for. So let's keep that balance and let's keep the focus.
So I think, Chair, to Jan's point and Rob, your earlier comment around this is very complicated, I think those are two areas we'll want to come back to in public when the board meets in January.
I think it's complicated in terms of the whole how to tackle it, but underline that, I think it's complicated in terms of how it works, as in from a patient flow point of view. This is a big prize in dealing with that.
Before we move on to the next bit, Jan, can I just ask the points that Wendy was making about domiciliary care and, if you like, the difficulties in terms of social care provision. I well remember a discussion that took place in my own hospital board about a year or so ago, which basically ran along the lines of, well, local governments can give a bit more money to help on detox, and therefore why don't they just go and do it, kind of thing. And I mean, I was able, I hope personally, to have a slightly more informed viewpoint on that, but there was that kind of reaction. And I think part of the role of this partnership is that we do have a genuine open exchange of actually what it means for each of the component parts of us. But that issue about don't just assume we can suddenly flood the place with lots of domiciliary care workers. They're not there.
No, and I think
so. How are we comfortable we've got within the STP the mechanism of discussing that well enough and honestly enough? And I think it's honestly enough, because I think that's good. I think we're raising it. That's really good. Do you think we've got the mechanism now in that discussion about
I think the
alternatives?
work of the North and South lines, which is going to come later, will show that is being addressed. And then like the wider community, we have got a strategy called our communities strategy, which is working with like the district councils, police and fire to look at the very preventative stuff and changing the conversations. We've got pilots like neighbourhood care. So I think we've got the balance. We can always do more, but I think it's a good start.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Wendy.
Just one further point. It would be worth noting that the daily issue that Jan's talking about, we are putting more resource into that even as we speak. Matt Hancock, Secretary of State for Health, of course, announced some funding for local authorities specifically, and I know that there's work going on with that funding in terms of the priorities. Perhaps in Cambridge are somewhat different than Peterborough. We all face the same challenges, but I know that in Peterborough, for example, we are putting 790,000 into adult social care detox by putting additional resources. But it still comes down to the fact you can't employ people that aren't there, and we need to find a solution to that, because people living longer, etc. Whether we get to them in the community, they're still going to need community help if it's not domiciliary help. And I just don't see where that's coming from at the moment. And as a policy, we do have to address the recruitment and retention of healthcare workers, both in the acute that may start as healthcare workers but move on progressively into nursing or something else. That is a real problem. How do we fix that? It's not that the STP should have a view of where government can assist it. And I think that doesn't exist at the moment.
Thank you very much, Wayne. So, thank you, Jan, and absolutely, I think you can be assured the board will continue to be interested in this.
Wouldn't expect anything less.
Did you just get £790,000 there? Is that?
Well,
No,
that's in the bank.
Okay, Paul, where that neatly goes into the financial plan. So, over to you, Paul, the financial plan, next item on the agenda.
Thank you, Chair. Just before, I'll take the paper as read and I'll just draw out some key highlights from it. Before I get into that, I just want to be clear, this is, before Wendy tells me, this is a paper that predominantly has health numbers in it, and the reasons for that are varied, but Wayne pointed out that the local government can't run a deficit. And the health sector for 18-19 has got a planned and funded deficit this year, and is broadly on track year to date, and is forecasting being on track for the end of the financial year, although clearly, as we've heard from Caroline and Jan, there is risks over the winter. But that plan at the moment is really just a composition of individual organisations' plans, and hasn't been formed in a way that we really understand how working together can add value. The work of the Finance Directors Group, which really incorporates and includes local government representation as well, is really thinking about how we work together to understand how the STP can add value to what's already going on in all individual organisations that have their own governance and their own accountability. So we really welcome the reframing of the STP priorities through the STP board, and the work of the finance group is completely aligned to those priorities. And we made some really good progress, we think, trying to start to reframe the financial framework, recognising, I think, what Wayne said about the difficulties of the financial framework for health and social care at the moment. So we've done some good work aligning financial incentives and contractual incentives. We've done some really involved and collaborative work about isolating what is driving our deficit, because it was very opinion driven before, and now we have evidence, and that's helped us with to focus the work people are undertaking to try and address that, and we are able to isolate those areas which we can control the most in the short term, which we think is helping focus. We've aligned our planning, so we're really working well together as we approach 1920. And we use that joint planning to put together coherent and aligned capital bids to try and attract investment into Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. That being said, we know this is not sustainable. Okay, running a deficit, even if it's planned and funded, can't go on forever, and we need to do the best we can to eat into that deficit. So we've got a number of next steps we're trying to do to try and help do that. We are continuing to our planning, and we are going to incorporate the work that all the work streams that are going on now are doing, that are trying to improve the quality of care, but also will have financial benefits. We'll incorporate those into our short and medium term plans. The NHS long-term plan has been referenced already today. That will change the financial framework, we hope, and that we will incorporate those into the plans as well. And we will continue to work and develop the financial system to try and align and help better decision making, to move money around the system into the best possible place, because there's a number of frustrations where we're still, even though we've tried to remove the barriers, we still aren't able to move that money as fit. And just to go back to the local government piece, we'll continue to try and incorporate the local government finances alongside the health finances, because they're not separate things. Even though we've got separate governance and accountabilities, decisions in health and decisions in social care impact on each other, and understanding those dynamics is going to be increasingly important as we make changes. And we'll continue to try and play the honest broker role and set up opportunities, but also be very clear about what we think has got credible plans behind it and what is achievable in the years. So that's the overall summary, and I'll take questions.
Thank you very much for I think it's worth, I'll bring Bill in a second, I think it's worth also saying that conversations that are taking place with the Mayor of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough will be brought me into understanding what the economic and financial position of the whole system is, but that's again like important in terms of that. Will?
Really useful paper again, thank you. My question was about the, we had I think earmarked something like 14 million saving from the integrated communities piece of work, which we agreed last meeting probably wouldn't show any benefit in the financial year. And I think we said we'd try and identify that elsewhere, and I wondered if that bit of work's been undertaken.
So we discussed that at the healthcare executive a month ago now. And you're right, so we're setting out what we think the overall opportunities are over quite a long period of time. The integrated neighbourhood we'll talk about in a second. We agree that some work will be done distributed across the STP to try and understand how we compensate for that next year. That work is ongoing, and as I said, I think alongside the detailed work, alongside other work streams, we'll try and incorporate those to our financial plan as we present the 1920 draft plan, probably in January or February.
Guy?
I wanted to mention the general fact that it was aligned with social care and heart-run deficit, which is something I always say when we talk about the health service deficit, because it doesn't apply in family care, which is, I feel like I'm on broken record. I think we're coming on to the neighbourhoods. I think the integrated neighbourhoods, which is in risk in the paper, The conversation in general practice land is confusing because we call it networks rather than neighbourhoods, so we've all got slightly different phrases. But the conversation about general practice networks has been moving, I think, further forwards over the last few weeks and months. And you talk in the paper about the risk and the need for that to be organically evolving. And I think I don't want that to be understood as being code for either not happening or being way behind. I think there is progress on that. I think that is moving from the bottom up. And I think we are moving in a sense of actually my own organisation, the LMC, has been moved into position of being able to promote that more actively amongst our constituents. And I think that will help us with the neighbourhood network agenda, if only we knew what we were talking about.
Thank you very much, guys. And the only reason that Paul doesn't put it in the paper is he thinks it's there for a petition every time they vote around to get the chief police officer. Okay. Anna.
Thank you. I just wanted to understand, because I'm not the best with these, the NHS funding system is tricky for me to get my head around. My understanding is that if we hit our controlled total deficit, Jan was giving me a lesson the other day, that doesn't then get added to our overall deficit position. Is that correct?
For the CCG.
Okay.
For the CCG, not for the providers.
Okay, so that's irrelevant to the total situation.
Yes.
Okay, and so then I wanted to ask just about this 55 million non-recurrent monies and that's going into the sustainability and transformation of the funding that could be withdrawn if we don't hit our overall figures, and just to understand the risk around that really and how much confidence we have in it. I mean, I've read that we're kind of on track, but obviously, you know, we've been talking about the risks around that.
Cool. Yeah, so without being flippant, if you need some financial advice, don't ask James. That is very hard.
It's quite new in the post.
Yeah.
But if you want commissioning advice, don't ask Paul.
So the 55 million is called Sustainability and Transformation Funding, or this year it's called Provider Sustainability Fund, and that is intended to be an incentive for providers to hit their agreed control totals, their control deficits, and if they do achieve their control deficit quarter on quarter, they will receive that money over the year. And we're on track to receive it at the moment. I think there is significant risk over winter, especially as we get into, if we're cancelling elective surgery. We are quite cognizant of that risk at FPPG, but also cognizant that individual organisations are managing those risks as well. What we are trying to do is make sure that decisions across the system, when we're moving money around, maximise the opportunity of the system to attract that money coming from the because that cash is really important to the system.
So it requires all providers doing their bit for the total. Yeah. But if it goes wrong, do we use the whole 55 million, or is it only per quarter? It's
per quarter and organisation by organisation.
Thank you.
So it's not listed here.
Well, I think it's sorry.
Do you want to say right?
Yeah. So I think that just for the public listeners' conversation, then it sounds like we've all got one budget, we're all working to the same budget, which we are, but individually we're trying to sort of manage and have account for our individual budgets for providers. So what you're watching is in the transition to try and get to understand the whole budget. But at the moment we are in many ways fighting for our own positions, but trying to sort of work with each other at the same time. So, but in this paper it's showing a trend towards trying to sort of get towards a system budget, and this is the first time you'll be able to sort of see that against. My question to Paul is, I look at the finance director in our organisation, and he's coming back and saying it was a good meeting. But are we building from bottom up or top down with the budget probably for next year?
Well, we're probably building from all directions, sideways as well, because individual organisations have got their processes and plans. There's clearly the people who are going to fund our deficits next year need to be confident that we've got the right plans. But equally, we work really hard to try and understand. I think this is where our focus is, to your point, Rob. Our focus is not really on what individual organisations are doing. We've got to have confidence in each other that we will be managing our resources in the most effective way. What can we do as an STP to add value to that? And that's what we've been focusing on. And I think that will lead then to a much more integrated financial assessment. So to your question, I think the STP focus is about the added value, about what can the system do better together to improve the financial and performance and quality outcomes of the system.
So it'll inform and, if you like, make sure we get to more challenging but realistic plans by organisation. But we've actually got an eye on some further conversation, STP level, to sort of
we think
what we can do.
By working together, we can help improve the individual organisation's financial positions further than we would have done on our own. That's what we think.
Right. Again, I always find the issue of CCG, hospital funding quite bizarre in the sense that from the public's perception, they see no difference between going to their GP, going to the hospital, going to the walking centre, but every single part of the NHS seems to work on a different budget, or there's a favourite expression, a revised control total, which changes all the time. So Anna's point about the 55 million is, you know, you get the 55 million if you reach your agreed deficit. Because I'm convinced there's a cupboard somewhere in Cambridgeshire that money's just thrown into, and it never gets seen again. But would it not also be true if you didn't make that, you might as just well overspend by another 55 million to achieve the set? That is actually a genuine question. I'm not, because you're trying to keep a lid on the money, and I understand that, that's great, but actually, in reality, if demand says you've got to spend the 55 million, would you just overspend by 55 million? And then somebody go, well, let's revise the control total, and everybody's happy again. Just out of interest.
Oh.
It's a genuine question.
I'm just trying to think how to answer it succinctly. So these deficits aren't a free-for-all.
No, I get that.
And we have to get funded for those deficits, and therefore to be funded, we have to negotiate with our funders. Sure. So there's a lot of scrutiny on all health organisations to, when they're projecting a deficit, that deficit is stretching and is the best that they can do financially, because the trade-off is always against the service we're providing. And in that, credibility of delivery is really important. So Roland's mantra since he's been at Cambridge is to say, deliver the plan. Right? Negotiate the best plan you can, and then deliver it. Because then you get credibility, and then we get freedom to make a difference, and we get more likelihood of capital investment.
And I'm not sure what we would do. You understand that I'm trying to point out the stupidity of the funding model, not what you're trying to do, which is great work trying to keep those totals down. But you know, if you had to spend 55 million, you're overspent. What are they going to do? Come around and give you? I don't know.
Do you want to comment on that, Rob? We'll all come in on that.
So I think it's a fantastic question, Paul. I think you've answered very well. I think the only thing I would add is it's on the people around this table to make the best possible use of the taxpayers' pound. Yeah. And Paul, I think what you're articulating here is that we can make better use of the taxpayer pound if we work together to invest in the right parts of the system. And that's very much, I think, what you and colleagues in the finance community are helping our clinicians do as we go through this next phase. So what we want to get to is more investment in the sort of thing we heard about from our patient at the very beginning of this board meeting. We want to be investing in falls prevention and exercise and wellness, not in the sorts of care that we're providing in our acute hospitals.
Now, I entirely agree, but I also would add that the system we are working to also, and I don't like using the word cuts, because councillors don't like those things, but it means stopping doing things in order to remain within your control totals, whether that's in the acute sector or, you know, you would say to me what I talked about earlier in terms of prevention, tell me where the money's coming from when you've got to divert money either from acute, which is struggling because they've got to pay bills, which are ridiculous PFI contracts, or you've got to take it from somewhere else. And I don't see where the money is to do the good things we need to do to reduce the acute sector spending and indeed improve people's lives and outcomes. I'm just not seeing the funding model when we keep talking about putting a lid on things and stopping doing stuff.
Well, that's presumably going to be continued work in progress and responsibility for us to say maybe shift where we see very clearly that more resourcing and capability in, say, primary care would be better for the system and around. That's the sort of issue that in real times we're going to have to be grappling with. How within the nature of shaping the model upwards or reconfiguring it locally, we're able to make some of those shifts in the long term. I'm going to bring Will, Gary, Scott, then Roland, and then I'm going to move on to finances with the sure assurance that we will come back to finances again another time. Will.
Well, I was just going to address Wayne's point. I think the issue is that if your regulators don't believe that you are trying to hit your control total, you may well get taken over by, let's say, Deloitte, who will be a team of people who come in just to cut the budget to make you hit your control total. So instead of a group of people like we've got here sitting around the table who care about patients, you've got an auditor come in and just say, let's slash these services, and that's why it's so important to try and...
As the chairman would attest to, when they came up with the hospital report, I said, let them come. Let them come. If they can get the hospital budget within budget, but don't cut any treatment and put the patients first, then let them come.
Well,
otherwise, what are they going to do?
They will come and cut treatment, that's the problem, so we need to try
Well, then the public would need to know that.
Yeah, I agree.
And it comes back to proper funding.
I think we're very clear. It's our responsibility. It's our responsibility. Actually, we've had a few fun in the meeting, but actually this is really serious stuff. And it's really serious stuff for patients. And actually, we want to get the right stuff for patients, and that will include fighting for more resource, make sure we optimise the use of resource, but actually keep it in control. Peterborough, that's the way.
It's just a serious point around the CCG budgeting. I don't want to get lost amongst some of the comments, and that's that for this year, if we don't hit our control total, we have the opportunity, if we do land on it, to have that, if you like, element of debt withdrawn. And if we don't, then that will go on to historic debt. So even when the system gets back to the situation where we're spending within our allocation, whatever you think of our allocation, we'd have a historic debt to pay back. So the level of services and transformation we'd be able to bring in for patients would be restricted to that. So it's actually very, very important that we pay great heed to what those control totals are and don't get lost in conversations about blowing the budget, because I think that would be inappropriate and detract us from a very important job going forward.
Scott?
Yeah, for fear of getting drawn into a tutorial about how the NHS finances work, the kind of point that Paul's making is what we are trying to reconcile as a system. So using the 55 million as a case in point, if one organisation is within touching distance of its control total and will get a relatively modest element of that 55 million, and another organisation is within the same touching distance but may not, but their share of that 55 million is considerably more, then it makes sense for one organisation to help the other organisation out so that we bring more cash into the system.
Yeah.
And to come back to Councillor Fitzgerald's point, the example that we saw today at the falls prevention programme, that was a programme that was funded by the system. What we're trying to do in looking at the system-wide finances is how can we free up more of that resource to invest in those type of schemes that in turn will avoid the DTOC issues or the ED attendances, all that sort of stuff. So it's a very complex process, which at the moment may also be overshadowed by other people in other places, recognising that the current funding model for the NHS as a whole isn't working sensibly, and the kind of issues that we're talking about related to that 55 million, that cash, it isn't income and it can't cover expenditure, it's just cash. How can we use that cash differently so that we can translate it into a source of funding that will cover additional expenditure?
Just to be clear, I'm not suggesting, by the way, Gary, that anybody blows their budget. I'm talking more about the way it's funded and the way we have to operate. That's reality, but it just seems a bit crazy to me that that's the system we have, which is the point about the health and social care funding model being broken. And that's the point that just reinforces it.
Roland? And then we'll move on to the other alliances.
So Paul, on page 14 of the report, we set out the 4 areas of immediate action in terms of what I would call making better use of the taxpayer pound to improve care. Before you set out where we could do better as a system and as a group of partners, delayed transfers of care, integrated neighbourhoods, which we're going to hear about in a moment, joined up commissioning, and making the best possible use of hospital capacity. So my question, Paul, to you and I think to other colleagues is, when we come to the January board, we're going to want to say more about how we are doing against delivering those financial plans, aren't we? And do you need any additional help from the board today to help us get to a stronger point in terms of where we are in January against those 4 areas? Recognising, I think, that integrated neighbourhoods is an area that's difficult to attribute cost savings to at this stage.
No, I think that no is the answer. Straightforward answer. All of those programs have been taken on board by healthcare executives and have been distributed throughout the leadership of the system. What the role of the finance group will now be is to support those work streams, but also to have been on this program to help them mirror up. So I think we're getting the engagement, feedback, and we'll be able to give a number to you in January.
Thank you, Paul. So thank you, colleagues. So should we move on then to the North and South Provider Alliance overviews, for both the overview and then going into each of the North and South in turn. Just keep it quick and big. So who's going to kick us off? Is Caroline, are you going to kick us off the overview?
So I'm going to introduce paper at 3.1, and me and James will talk to the North and South progress so far. So the 2 alliances, in summary, have been created to deliver our priorities, and we focus on the specific needs of the population in 2 halves, the North and the South, within that. So just like the STP, these alliances have come together, they're leaders of the system, they're leaders of organisations. So we've put together in a North and a South alliance the providers of all services within health and social care. We've joined them together with the voluntary sector, we've joined them together with our patient representatives in health and wellbeing, and we've asked us to work together in partnership to deliver something different and as a different model of delivery. Ultimately, we're going to be looking at integrating our care around our local populations, our patients, and our population. It's not just our current patients, it's the prevention and the promotion of our future potential patients, not being potential patients. So we're attempting to meet the needs of our population in a north and south way. We're trying to ignore organisational boundaries, we're trying to match ourselves to what might be an integrated care system, but at the minute we're forgetting anything structural or anything organisational boundary. We're just agreeing to come together to agree how we can deliver some things in an integrated way. And we've got to try this. It's how we need to work together. We've heard examples today of how we've got to work together to deliver some things. So in a north and south way, that's simply an introduction on how we decided to deliver things.
That's very helpful, Caroline. That's what helped with my contextual background. And I know there will be issues that we will come back to as we work that through. I'm conscious of something more, what takes place at the board, at the whole county level, what takes place, just how much difference can we allow for within one system, these kind of issues people have used, so we'll come back to those as we go. But okay, Caroline, that's really helpful. And I assume just for the sake of just really pointing out, I'm sure everyone knows this, and on page 19 it says the Alliance current drafting outline, which will be presented to the STP board in January 2018, of course 2019 into the next meeting we'll have. Just for the sake of absolute. So should we move on then to the North provider reports? Again, is that Neil?
Yep.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you, Chair. The paper to be taken as read. Really, I guess the Northern Alliance of providers and people representing health and social care really wanted to focus on kind of some priorities to get things done, and so it chose 5 priorities, and I'll quickly take you through them. Probably the main priority is this kind of integrated neighbourhoods, and as Guy said earlier, that word neighbourhoods can mean different things, and I guess it can mean kind of the involvement of primary care networks, so primary care populations of 30 to 60,000 coming together to think about how they could care for their population in a better way. It can mean the voluntary sector around those communities, kind of thinking about how, as primary care or GPs we access that, our interface with CPST and community working, etc. And so really, I guess the Northern Alliance is spending its time thinking about how to kind of really try and maximise the benefit of working together for local populations. And I think, my reflections are,
that actually things are different in the north. Obviously better in the north. No, sorry. We're one STP. So in the north we've got our own challenge in terms of demographics. We've got our own challenges in terms of deprivation, etc. And I think it is right for us to think about different populations and the challenge that looking after them bring. And I hope that this more focused way of looking at populations will really have benefit. I think some of the words people use, like learning and sharing, is really to be encouraged. And I think primary care, as well as the community, etc. There's a lot we can learn from each other about how to do things differently. In the north, we've focused on an integrated delivery board, which again brings together many of the same partners, and it's kind of mainly focused at a more operational level in terms of can we actually get some things done. And so that group has kind of come up with some asks and some offers. A lot of those asks and offers are about the kind of interface between different organisations and reducing the kind of tension between the interface, trying to make that interface work as smoothly as possible. And the hope is that those will be the kind of quick wins that gain some kind of momentum and gather some confidence in the delivery of the north. As well as the work kind of integration in the north, and I know James is coming next, but I think there is work looking to align what's going on in the north and the south, cognizant of the different populations that we look after, the different flavours that might have. But as an STP, it's important for the STP to have oversight and understand what happens. It's also important for us to work with our partners such as the LMC to understand how we can work together to help in terms of primary care networks. The other priorities are the Peterborough City Care Centre. So one of the good things about having a group around the north is that we can focus on things like the Peterborough City Care Centre, and so that's had kind of a good amount of debate about how that kind of facility, which currently holds the walking centre, X-ray facilities, etc. There's some beds for rehabilitation in there, and there's some office space as well. So how is that kind of really good premium healthcare facility used? And so Jan in the CCG has led some work on kind of that utilisation, and there's some plans with that. With delayed transfers of care, I would say that I think people are looking for really the kind of what I described in terms of integrated working in neighbourhoods and communities. I think we're looking to that as to hopefully be potential solutions for the future, and detox, as Jan mentioned earlier. There is the thought that community/primary care working in a different way could help with that problem, and I think for me we need to first build the building blocks of that community-based working, and then that allows us to have a forum in which we can kind of explore how we can help the system in a better way. The group also looked at the joint emergency team, which is to try and keep people well in their homes, and Mustafa and myself have led some work over the summer with lots of workshops talking about the joint emergency team, thinking about how it could be made kind of more efficient and better. That's a team that involves paramedics, emergency practitioners and support workers, and that's concluded kind of with a winter plan that's increased kind of things like the scope of practice as well as the age range that the JET group look after. That's now gone into kind of more standard commissioning and the last and probably most important is the prevention and health promotion. So I guess as we use these different words of neighbourhood teams, neighbourhoods, networks, etc., we've heard recurrent themes in this meeting about prevention. Prevention can mean different things to different people, but if one of the prevention is kind of health promotion, etc., the other is preventing people going to hospital. And so what we're trying to do is align the system is doing well actually to align with prevention and health promotion, and there's a separate group looking at it, met again this week, and they're looking really to focus resource on some of the most challenging populations around the Peterborough area, and then into beds, etc. It's looking at kind of both short, medium and longer term projects as well. And lastly, financial solutions, as discussed earlier. I think it's right that the kind of the formation of neighbourhood working neighbourhoods is allowed to kind of establish first. We're looking to have kind of a more definitive paper coming to the next board, and the one thing that we can do to the board is just to support that journey and allow the neighbourhoods to take off.
Thank you very much, Neil. Can I suggest we go on to James first, and then if there are questions, on the two, because of the
compare and contrast. I mean, that's deliberate. That's why we created the two alliances, because provision of care in Dogsthorpe or Wisbech or Christchurch in the Fens is fundamentally different to source than what Cambridge Centre in Cambridge. So let's pick up from James to hear how the South Alliance are doing, and then we'll move on.
Thank you, Chair. The South Alliance, very much as the North Alliance, has been working on building relationships across the providers and commissioners on the patch, including the voluntary sector and our local authority. And I think it's fair to say that the relationships on which this provider alliance is based have been flourishing, that actually coming together to think about shared issues and aligned interests has very clearly brought a focus to the solutions which we think about providing for our population. We're very cognizant of the challenges facing the local health economy, and we also believe that the challenges are not only related to the budgetary constraints or the national targets for acute sector, but also very much around the workforce provision, both within the local authority in providing care, but also within the primary care workforce, which is suffering major challenges. One of our key objectives is to support the development of primary care networks, bringing together general practitioners, their clinical teams, around populations of 30 to 50,000 as a basis, as a coherent group which is small enough to be human and humane and local, but large enough to provide the sort of scale which is needed to provide resilience within the primary care workforce, and as a basis to have sensible discussions around neighbourhood teams. Based on that, we're also working much on the integration of integrated neighbourhoods, where we think about these populations and the teams based not around organisational boundaries or tasks, but beginning to focus on the individual needs of people within the system and how we can best serve that. Trying to become agnostic about organisational boundaries, trying to reduce the transactional costs and the transactional errors which occur when we cross boundaries between organisations. And also, I think, working very closely with our public health colleagues around population health data, trying to get to a granular level, not in the abstract, but in the very real sense of what does this population, this subsection of population need, and beginning to segment and stream those who have got greatest need and allocate resources appropriately. We also very much believe that the solution to some of the challenges we're facing is about engagement with our communities, about empowering the communities and energising them to solve some of the issues around the social care. I've got a fantastic, lovely chap who's dying at home as we speak, who's being cared for by 3 of his neighbours on a rota basis, who wants to die at home. He's got no family, his neighbours have clubbed together, we have a rota, and we're determined we will look after him at home. That doesn't touch the radar of any other provider organisation apart from primary care. But that is the power of communities, and it's one of the things that we need to capitalise on and realise that there is a real sense of not just the state provision, the NHS provision, or individuals doing things for themselves, but there is this middle way of communities and commons looking after each other. We're also very clear that the solution to the system challenges and financial challenges is not more hospital services. The solution is actually largely going to be about re-engineering what happens outside the hospital sector to enable the hospital sector to reach its efficiency targets and challenges. The relationships we built within the provider alliance are genuine. We know each other well enough now to have robust and honest conversations. And I think that clarity and the ability to be robust and honest with each other is helping us move forward, where we actually begin to genuinely align our interests and understand what's happening. And ultimately, fundamentally, we're very much focused on recognising we have a finite budget, we have genuine, real people that we're looking after in our communities, and what we must do is ensure we provide the best possible care that we can, irrespective of historic organisational boundaries. So it's an exciting time, and we're very keen to keep pushing forward and actually make practical changes on the ground.
Thank you very much. Thanks both Neil and James for that. And the overall Carol. Could I just ask a question that relates in the sense of both? And it's prompted by Guy's point earlier. You call it potato, I call it potato. It's network or neighbourhood. Is this genuinely a source of confusion, or is this something we can live with?
think we're all trying to do the same thing, which is
Yeah.
to align the system and consider primary care as one of the important building blocks. And I think we're trying to think about scalability, but scalability at a level that makes sense to deliver services. So whatever we call it, I think doesn't really matter. And I think part of those building blocks are networks of primary care working together. Part of it is looking at kind of the community provider and the emergency kind of community provision as well. So for me, personally, my reflections are that we are all trying to do the same thing, and I think the benefit of the STP is that we can just channel all of that energy to deliver.
Guy, do you think it's a problem?
No, I think if we're all pulling enough in the same direction, it isn't the bottom. We had an interesting debate when we were talking about networks, neighbourhoods. We ended up deciding we might call it a town. We thought that was another possibility. But the networks is a word that the GPs understand, and networks is a phrase that will be in the GP contract, contractual initiatives and drivers towards working together in networks, with money attached to that from next April. And so it's a word we have to use with the GPs, but networks of GPs working neighbourhoods is fine.
And I'm conscious there's localities as well, it's a phrase we use sometimes in some local authority areas as well.
Yeah, so talking from the perspective of somebody who's, this has been my baby in social care now for the last year and a half and a year in earnest, that we've been running 2 pilot schemes, one in Snow and one in St Ives, purely delivering adult social care in a very different way. We call it neighbourhood cares, which is a literal translation of Buurtzorg, which is the Holland model, which is a medical model, and we've been using the principles of that to deliver in 2 of our areas. So we're a year in, and I hope we've learned quite a bit about what to do. One of the things that we've learned is that you have to get in there and get on with it and stop talking about it and release people. And I'm very concerned I haven't been involved closely with the North and South Alliances, but I'm very concerned the flavour of the paperwork feels like a very top-down approach, and that is not the way to make this happen. I saw the word organic, and if you're going to allow something to happen organically, and we absolutely would support that from our learning, that you have to start small, you have to let it grow, you have to take the bureaucratic handcuffs off people and let them get on and do their jobs, and so long as they get it, they will find a way to make it work, and it's hugely exciting. You've got to allow people to get on with it, and I'm worried that this feels like very top-down, and you've just got to release people to get on with it and make something happen and get started and learn as you go along. Wendy knows this, I'm really sceptical about population sizes of 30 to 60,000. I come from East Cambridgeshire, whole of East Cambridgeshire is only 80,000, so you're talking 1 or 2 patches. We are working on population sizes of 10,000, and I tell you, if that gets too big, we will chop it in half and we'll make it small again, because you only release the will and the capacity and the huge resources out there in communities by making it local, and I mean really local. I'm talking about people's villages, I'm talking about people's towns at the most, and that is the way that you make it work. So I've been talking a lot with Wendy about how we can make sure that social care plugs into this, and how we can make your patch sizes of 30 to 60 filter down to a much more local level, and I think that's something that the councils can certainly help to make happen, because what we're good at is releasing the power of the community and doing community development, and I think the NHS and district nursing has lost that, frankly. My big question is, when will the integrated prevention hub pilot start? I want a start date. We've been talking about it for a long time. Around delayed transfers of care, one of the things that I said to my 2 pilot areas, St Ives, is I want nil delayed transfers of care for adult social care reasons in our 2 patches. Actually getting the hospitals to tell St Ives staff when they've got a patient from their patch in the hospital has been a huge challenge. I mean, our staff are supposed to follow one of their residents into hospital and start advocating to get them out, and I can't even get the system to tell our staff when one of their residents is in hospital. So we're a long way from making that a reality. And I've got 2 really practical things that the NHS could do to help me with my neighbourhood cares pilots. One is you could release some district nurses, 1 in each area, and put them into my 2 neighbourhood cares teams, and let's let them go and see what happens. And the second thing is I had a really inspiring conversation just yesterday, I think it was, around leg clubs. So leg clubs are up and running and working in different areas, and it's about treatment of lower leg issues, and it's about a social model of, the way I view it is like Call the Midwife, but for legs basically. It's leg clubs in village halls and community buildings, where you invite people who have got issues, mainly around ulcers, which we know district nurses spend a huge amount of time dealing with, to come to a club. And it's not about joining a club to have your leg ulcer dealt with. It's about, absolutely, as we heard Mary talking earlier, I'm not an old person with an issue around falls. I want to get in and be with other people and be in a social environment where this can be dealt with en masse with lots of people at the same time. And I think if you wanted to start a leg club in Soham and St Ives, my two teams are absolutely there ready to support that and make it happen. And what we need is the NHS to come with us and say, yeah, we'll make the district nurses plug into this and make this a reality. And I can prove to you that we can make savings in your district nurses' time by making that happen. So there's two really practical ways that you can help. And the final thing, is that I was really concerned that I didn't hear any talk in all of your paperwork about the two neighbourhood cares pilots and social care, and no discussion about social care. So my question is, when you talk about integrated working, are you talking about integrating the NHS and all the providers, or are you talking about integrating the social care? Because that doesn't come across in the paperwork.
I better say something, Hannah. No, it is an admission. We are well embedded in that work, Anna. So it's quite right. You're right. When Nielsen did forget to mention social care, just in the list of people, but we absolutely are embedded in it. And certainly, the neighbourhood care has been talked about a lot. We should say that. So I think it was just an admission of presentation. That's all.
I should make sure we do not have those issues.
I'll go like that to Neil next time.
Okay. Clearly there are a whole range of issues there, and really important that those are thought through back, as reflected back to within the alliances, since that's the right place to do that. There was some detailed factor of the integrated prevention hub pilot when, James?
I don't think we've got a start date for that yet.
I think that's what Anna was fearing, so she'll press you further, I'm sure. But understandably. The issue about top-down, there's a philosophical issue there that Hannah was raising for both. What's your sense of that? Is that a fair challenge, or do you feel, no, we are trying to be bottom-up, or what?
I think it's a very fair comment and question, and I absolutely agree with Councillor Anna that the success of provider alliances is going to happen at a grassroots level and building upwards, and that needs to be supported, enabled and facilitated by the STP rather than dictated and controlled by it. I think the issue about paperwork for an STP board is that by its very nature and the nature of this format, it is a process which looks top-down, but actually the conversations on the ground are very practical, very real. It's about making things happen tomorrow and next week and next month. The challenge of doing things from a granular level coming ground up is that some of the things we are trying to do require a shift of resources into the community, into primary care, into social care to enable these to happen. And the challenge is that it will require STP commitment to allow that to happen. So we need to engage at the top level to have some resource shift, as well as do the organic work on the ground to enable people. So we need to marry those two together to really make it happen.
So you want to answer that, yeah?
Completely agree with my level of credit.
All right, Roland, and then we'll move on to the next one.
So thank you. I think this area of work has made enormous progress in the last 8 weeks. So a big thank you to everybody across the system in primary care, community services, social care and the hospitals. And Jan, I'm sure you'd agree in many ways, this is sort of where we were on delayed transfers of care a year ago. And I think what you're articulating here is a very strong desire for this to be driven ground up around communities with whatever population is appropriate, drawing on all of us as partners to move forward. But I think what we need within that, for this board and for the public and for the taxpayer is an understanding of what the framework is within which we're playing. So James, we can be sure that given that this is the single most important thing we're going to be doing for the next 3, 5 and 10 years' time, is going to deliver for us. So I am sure that the board would fully endorse you moving to the next phase of, yes, bottom up, but within a framework that we can all understand, and then back in terms of resourcing. Big thank you.
Good. Sorry,
Rob, please.
This I'm not mistaken, because it's sort of, I've got ground up and I've got sort of trying to get on with something that's potentially, structurally, where we're going to end up. So I think we're going to reference this in the next document coming up. So I think as an STP board, we need to sort of get our heads around what pace we're going to go at and how we're going to progress it. We've got a balance of creative stuff of just running free and etc., but also some control and some measurement and some momentum. So
I mean, I just say, so the leadership of the STP have laid that challenge down to us, and we are working together to think through what the phasing would be, etc. So I think by the time we get towards the next 3-4 weeks, we'll have a great more deal of clarity, and that will be presented to the January board.
Thank you. Thank you everybody for that. So clearly very complex, but also quite part of jigsaw. Should we move on then to item 4.1? Now, this is a paper which says there is a question about what the shape of the longer-term models of care and integration should be, that there inevitably will be differences of view about that, and that it is something that we're going to have to come back to substantively at our next board meeting, or next January meeting, and that in so doing will be better informed also, hopefully, by the expectations nationally of the long-term plan and the vision for integration that is going to be articulated there. So I don't think it's necessarily particularly appropriate for us to debate all the substantive issues now. That's, in a sense, the paper is saying we know there are those issues. The proposal is that we bring that back to the January board meeting, but in the meantime there should be individual interviews with partners across the piece to help inform that. And so that timeline and that process is what we're being asked to approve today. So I'm going to suggest that unless someone has a clear reason to think absolutely not the way to do it, if we're content to note that and agree that's the way that we mandate Caroline, Matthew and others to do that, and then come back to that in the January meeting. Is that content? Okay, fine, good. So that's the so we'll then move on then to the digital piece, which again is a piece of impression.
Chair, if I may, I need to excuse myself, but I'd just like to have one comment on the digital paper.
Please do.
Before. Yeah, and that's the
Best answer.
yes. On the bullet points on the second page of the report, in the introduction, the last bullet point is the create the future and support innovation, research and service development by creating rich integrated information resources and analytics using machine learning. And I'm not really sure that that bullet point is coming out in this report, and I just challenge the people working on this that that's something that I think is important stream that I don't really see coming through.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Will. I will do my best to address that. So I'm the
Sorry, Will. I mean, both Will and I know Councillor Wayne have to go. They've got other commitments and other meetings now.
So I'm presenting this on behalf of Strive Aluwalia, who is the chair of the Enabling Group, and it's sort of the paper do two things. One is very briefly remind the board of the digital strategy that you approved at your last meeting, and Will's pulled out one of the key planks of that, but primarily to update colleagues on where we are with some of building the technical infrastructure, basic building blocks that we need in order to do some of more of those more complex things like using AI and machine learning in order to improve how we deliver more evidence-based and consistent patient care. And primarily to update on the HSLI bids, which are the health system-led investment bids, which is money that has been given to us or nominally allocated to us by NHS England for investment in digital infrastructure, so fit for kit.
in a non-technical way as opposed for people. And we have submitted bids for the next 3 years, so in 18, 19, 19, 20 and 2021. The total of the bids that we've put money in for is about 6 billion. Which was the amount that was being allocated to us. The really good news is that our 18-19 bids have been more or less approved now. We'll get the final approvals, we hope, tomorrow, which is from the Treasury. But we've now gotten through all of the levels of NHS England approval, which means that we just need to submit one more final set of documents to NHS England, and then hopefully the capital money will be released, particularly because a number of the bids are in train already, and the bids that are supported are attached in Annex 1 if anyone has got any questions on them. But this is just for information.
Thanks very much, Catherine. It's very helpful, of course. Thank you for introducing that on behalf of the Jake. Just as a personal piece of information to the board, partly prompted by digital, not exclusively, I have begun conversations with the opposite numbers in Norfolk and Suffolk, so that those who chair the STPs in those two counties, we have some mechanism, at least keeping dialogue and discussion going, because clearly digital and some of this will be around quite big geographical footprints to be fully effective. And so I thought it's important that I've had those conversations with Patricia in Norfolk and my colleague Nick in Suffolk, which I've done. Very loosely informal, but just to try and make sure that we're having conversations together and not going off in different directions.
So, what's the connection? Because there's also Lincolnshire as well. So what's the logic with?
The connection was in the context of it was partly in the context. I think your point is absolutely right, because of course no geography is perfect. And if your view is that we should have a conversation with Lincolnshire, I'd be more than happy to do that. I recognise in the context of Peterborough, so let's have a conversation. Partly, of course, the geography of NHS England is extreme, but I take your point, and I'm more than happy to have that conversation. I think it's a very valid point.
I think the general
yeah.
because Lincolnshire on lots of things.
Yes, no, I think your point is absolutely right. Fair point. So I'm more than happy to pick it up. Guy,
come back on Rob's point first off. One of the reasons why those connections are deemed to be significant is there was a separate process to develop what became known as LICRA, which has not got a Y in it. It's got nothing to do with cycling shorts or any of that stuff. It's about the local healthcare record exemplar. So it was about how do we share information across the kind of STP footprints to create an integrated pool of information that we could then use largely at that point for research purposes, but from practical operational purposes as well. And that ambition is still there. It's still part of the STP strategy, digital strategy that we've got. But if I can come back to a couple of points that Catherine made, and also Will's point, the reason the paper is set out in the way that it is, I'm speaking on behalf of the Digital Enabling Group of which I'm a part, is because we have to get ourselves to a kind of common level, or a standardised level of digital capability across the system, because it is very mixed. Some people have invested significant sums of money over the piece, and some have not. We're trying to get everybody up to the same level, which in turn will give us that resilience of platform to start with the really smart stuff that we should be doing. And secondly, the HSLI bids, just to remind everybody, it's match funded. So this isn't about a gift that we're getting, it's about making conscious decisions as individual organisations, but on behalf of the wider system, addressing that former point. We're putting money in, we can put skin in the game, as they say, but also we're getting help from the centre to do that. So bringing both those strands together is about how do we create that capability, and on the back of that, how are we able to better share information to help us be smarter about what we do, how we do it, and the outcomes that we hope for.
Can I just respond to that? Okay. Just listen to this conversation. I mean, digital is it's growing. If I'm a member of the public, and I live in my caution is, or my challenge going forward is actually, we need to get STP, we may be bang on this, but that we don't create areas of the STP that have actually got, much better technology than another part. Because the danger is that, we've created something that's really sort of in the south or the north, and then you've got a super duper IT system for care, but not the other. So I think there's a direction we're going to work towards. We need to make sure, just like, if there's a number of hospitals are keen for hospitals to have the same systems. But, so that's what we're
Yeah.
going
Okay. And the ambition is to bring everybody up
Yeah.
to kind of level of the best, as opposed to having to work at the basic lowest.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. So, thank you, Catherine, on the digital and we're running about 7 or 8 minutes over my scheduled time, so my apologies to everyone for that. Shall we then, we've got the items of risk assurance, which you are being sought to approve. I think there's always a risk that risk doesn't give sufficient attention because it's at the tail end of the agenda. Can I suggest if there are comments on whether you think there are omissions or peculiarities in the risk proposition, that you give them to me or to Roland, and then we'll reflect that through the HC, the executive team below that. I think otherwise there's a risk that we seem to just go through it very briskly. Likewise, I think the distributed leadership model report is for information. It's been a fundamental part of this, that as we build trust and the maturity and the strength of the partnership, it's not in the hands of just 1 or 2 people, but it's distributed amongst us in a meaningful way. So Catherine's paper is reflecting to report the current position on that. So again, if we take that as is. Any other business, I've only got, and I'll come on to questions from the public in a second, any other business point I would make is that at the moment the date of the next meeting on your agenda is scheduled for the 24th of January. I am aware that that clashes actually with one of the Trust's board meeting days, I think CPMT stock. So we are looking at what we can do to adjust that, and we will be in touch, or are in touch as we go, to do that. And clearly, as far as members of the public are concerned, we will publicise that date in well-picked order. And I think location-wise, we will be circulating around the county. It's important that people across the county, the public board meeting, caravan. So we will be, I think possibly Ely, we're thinking about that one, but we will confirm both date and time at some point. So shall we move on then to questions from the public? There was a question, I think, from Sheila and Val from Health Watch. Do you want to read out your question, or do you want? Yeah.
That's Sandy.
Sandy. Sorry, Sandy. Sorry, Sandy.
So Health Watch is really pleased to see that the STP board is meeting in public, and even more pleased to see that members of the public are here to take advantage of that. We'd like to know what plans our system leaders have got for engaging with the public as services change in the future. So, obviously not a detailed answer, I was not expecting, but just to launch that question.
Well, I'll ask Roland to pick up that and say, just before he does, at the beginning of the meeting I came and gave 4 or 5 reasons as to why being in public is actually vitally important. And one of those was about the ongoing engagement with patients and groupings of patients in shaping services. As a philosophical principle, I think we are all very much clear that that must be the case. What we're less clear about, and perhaps not always been as consistently good about, is how we do that. And so I think whether to do it, no question. How to do it is the issue that I think we want to continue to engage with Health Watch and others as to how to help shape that. But Roland.
Yes, I mean, it's absolutely central to what the next 12, 18, 24 months will look like. And I'll make 2 points. So firstly, we're meeting here today in public so we can be very clear what we're doing, what we're trying to tackle, and where we need the support of the people we look after to help move forward. The second point I'd make is we thought very hard about the patient story we would have at the beginning of this session, and I think that's a very good example of where we are putting patients at the centre of the sorts of models of care we're trying to deliver. And across all the things we've talked about today, we're trying to aim at that gold standard of what we heard about for the first 25 minutes. Are we there yet in all of those areas? No, we're not. Do we want to be? Yes.
Thank you. So, sir.
Yeah, thank you. My name is David Owen. I'm a GP in Huntingdon. First of all, it's very good to have the STP meeting in public. I don't quite know why you haven't had this before, and I think this is very important. One, I've got loads and loads of questions, but I won't ask you too many. One is about this meeting. This is a very important meeting. It's a very expensive meeting. Lots of taxpayers' pounds are being spent here on this meeting. A quarter of your time was spent on a presentation. Is that a good use of your time? Yes, a patient story is important, but did it have to be a quarter of your meeting? That's just a comment to make about your meeting.
I think it's a fair challenge, and we'll reflect on it. I think.
And the other thing which my GP colleagues around the table here won't be surprised is many GPs in Huntingdon do not know that the STP is splitting general practice into two. You've got the north and the south, and history says that those GPs in Huntingdon always get left behind. So let's involve those GPs in the middle, please, and not forget them. Thank you.
I think, again, a very valid point. Do you want, James and Neil, do you want to just say anything on that?
Yeah, so it's a good point. Hi David, how are you?
Hi David.
Thank you very much for your question. Huntingdon is of course not forgotten. There are GP from Huntingdon. So Stuart Shields, his chair is empty today, but he has been attending the STP meeting. And around the Northern Alliance table, there have been GPs from both Fenland and Huntingdon around that table. And as the Northern Alliance looks to think about its kind of leadership, its kind of key building blocks it's not just focusing on Peterborough, it's also looking at Huntingdon and Wisbech. So to give you some reassurance, hopefully, that Huntingdon's absolutely not forgotten, and of course we're trying to do our best to think about the different populations when we make decisions.
So can I be clear, is for the purposes of the Alliance, Huntingdon is firmly in the north?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got Stuart and Abby Richardson involved in our thinking as well.
You wouldn't expect anything less from me.
No, that's fine. And your first point we'll reflect on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm Richard Taylor, I'm a Cambridge resident, and I'd just like to suggest that in future financial reports to the board, that Councillor Bailey's question on if the sustainability and transformation funding is going to be received in full or not is proactively addressed on a quarterly basis and a per organisation basis, as you said that information is available. The reason I'm asking for that is that it's the kind of information that I could foresee myself using to lobby my MPs if funding was to be reduced because of poor performance. I think that's a crazy thing to do, and I can see myself writing to my MP on that point if more detail was available.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Madam Sir.
Sue Prime, Governor of North West Anglia Foundation Trust, and first of all I want to thank you for holding it in public again, especially those who really push for it, because it's really helpful to understand the working of the board and how it relates to the individual trusts as well. But my particular point is on DTOC. When I looked at the report, I both looked at the milestones and I also looked at the plus 30 days in the past. I was concerned that it was very heavily influenced about actions for the trusts generally, and not so much in the community. And considering we're looking at an integrated solution, I would like to have seen a slightly wider element of the community reflected in the report.
Yeah, so it is a really balanced programme, and I'll again look at the reports, make sure that we do make that balance. But it is balanced. But what we've really tried to do on the DTOC work, particularly on this reset again, is say actually we can solve all of the problems out in the community, which is where previously we spent a lot of time focusing on. And if we don't get the operating processes right across everywhere, we still weren't going to hit the mark. But it's not just all about what we're asking the acutes to do. There are work streams specifically looking at the capacity and demand, what we're doing on discharge to assess, and actually how we get the flow out through community services as well. So it is wider than that.
I understand that, and that's really good, but the report didn't reflect that, and I think I saw targets for the acutes and not others, so in future it would be useful to see. Thank you.
No, I think that's a very helpful point. If there are any other...
Oh,
yes, right. So lady at the front. Yeah.
I tried to email this question on Monday, but my email got bounced back. So basically, it's I was looking for the minutes of the STP board meetings after I think it was May, because they're not listed here, and I can't find any HCE minutes for this year.
Catherine?
So the board minutes from May are just subject to approval at the next meeting, and as soon as they're approved in about 20 minutes, they'll go up on the healthcare exec ones. We just need to go through a process of reviewing them all, because and they should be up. I've set the team a deadline of making sure they're up by Christmas. So they just take a bit of time, and then we're going to get into a habit of giving them up much more regularly. So apologies for that.
The reason I'm interested in board meetings is that I've been attending, the CCG had various roadshows talking about the STP for a number of years. And one roadshow was held in Huntingdon, and the previous chief officer said that the CCG doesn't have the money to fund 3 hospitals. And we were in Huntingdon at the time. He didn't actually say that Hinchinbrook was a threat. And all of the meetings that I've been to in Huntingdon, there's no mention of downgrading Hinchinbrook at all. But in one of your Fit for the Future documents, you talk about changing orthopaedics and ENT, perhaps moving acute to CUH and just having elective work at Hinchinbrook. So this is why I'm interested to see whether you've actually discussed downgrading Hinchinbrook Hospital at all, or whether that's off the radar now.
Roland and then Caroline. Roland, Roland, as well as being accountable to the STP, is the chief executive of Addenbrooks, and Caroline is the chief executive.
So there were many things within the framework that were the priorities for the STP that were considered on with the public. And the using one of the sites as a hub or a centre of excellence with another site with a spoke arrangement or a less spoke is what we went for on that. So there's no intention to change Hinchinbrook Hospital. Indeed, we're about to start going out and talking about expanding and putting more beds and building up therapies and rehab services there. But it has been looked at that it might not be possible to do trauma orthopaedics on that site, because we're trying to shore up some of the issues that we've had on the Hinchinbrook site over the small size of their clinical teams. So it's around over the clinical sustainability. But the Hinchinbrook site is vibrant, we're expanding, one of the capital bids that we've got in as an STP is to develop the site, and I'm hoping to get some good news on that in the next few weeks within that. So there's no intention to downgrade the Hinchinbrook site, but as part of the clinical strategy for North West Anglia, we are moving some things around to shore up their longer term future rather than to downgrade that.
So some reconfiguration of services,
yes.
but to strengthen and maintain its viability.
And that also involves taking some services from the Addenbrooke site to bring them to the Hinchinbrook site as well, as we reconfigure across the whole of the acute provision.
Thank you. So I'd rather probably not need it. There was another question at the back.
Yeah, my name is Rick Harris. I'm a public governor for CPFT. And my question is also about detox, maybe one for Jan. My question is, can you really reassure the public that the detox statistics that are quoted are actually accurate? So the Nuffield Trust published a study which you may be familiar with last year, showing that the figures can underrepresent detox by as much as 50%. The Newton Europe study suggested it could be as much as 69%. And indeed the King's Fund suggested that the variability in the comparing across national targets suggests, and I quote, that the credibility and usefulness of comparisons derived from detox statistics are considerably undermined by the variability. So my question to you is, can we trust the statistics, and can you assure us that they're accurate?
So I think there's probably a couple of different answers to that question. So we have spent a lot of time getting agreement on how we code what a detox is, building our standard operating procedures around what the national definitions are. So there are national definitions and national guidelines for what we should and shouldn't count. So I think there could be a question on what the national definition is and how proactive that is in what its description of does somebody need to be in a hospital or not, and what constitutes a day. But it is set by national guidance, and our programme is all built and our coding is aligned across that national programme. We've had to do a lot of work on that, and of course the trouble with the numbers we report is it's a moment in time. So if I give you an example, so if a patient on a Monday is waiting for an assessment and on a Tuesday is waiting for a placement in a nursing home under continuing healthcare, depending on which day, actually we'll have the reason for the delay change. So we have to be very careful when we're looking at this data, and what we're trying to build is a cumulative picture around actually what's happened on their journey as a detox rather than the moment in time reporting that we've got now. So
Is it accurate? It's as accurate as we can get it within the confines of the national definitions. Is there a statistical argument and an ethical argument around detox and what the description of it is? Probably.
Well, I'm aware that there's a national standard, but the point that's being raised by the National Trust is that people are interpreting that national standard in different ways. So maybe I should put the question slightly differently, is should we have an audit within these Cambridge and Peterborough to see whether we are actually interpreting it consistently?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. So we have started doing audits across the patch on the variation, which is why we've now got one way of coding across all sites and how that's working. The second point is, as part of the peer review that was mentioned earlier, they did actually look at how we were doing that as well, and the peer review has actually given some thoughts on how we're doing that. But that does come back to the kind of complex pathways issue that I raised when I was talking about the paper, is that we have to get the pathways right, and some of that coding is related to the pathways. So am I 100% sure that every patient that always appears on that list is absolutely right? I don't think you could ever be sure of 100%, but the team is working really, really hard to get that consistency and that accuracy.
Okay, thank you. So I don't think I saw. Two more questions.
Okay. I'm Jane Howell and I'm a member of the public. I have been monitoring what the STP has been doing, which has been very difficult because we've been meeting in private. But so congratulations today, and I hope that hasn't been too painful for you all. The issue that I want to raise is looking at your website. I noticed that the facts that I'd be interested in, obviously, the minutes of all previous meetings is huge, and there's so many that are redacted. Of course, having natural curiosity, I'd really like to read the redacted ones. Is there any chance that you might go back through some of them and at least release them to public gaze?
I mean, I think so. I mean, Catherine will take it away. I mean, she's referred to it. We were. I'm completely with you. I think redaction creates suspicion. What the interesting bits mask with the bits they're not telling us. In my experience, actually, the bits that are redacted are amongst the most boring bits. So from my point of view, us meeting in public from here on in, absolutely is a strong commitment. But the past.
I think what we could do is we could go and have a look, go back and have a look at those. I have to say there's not terribly much interesting in them.
It would be nice just to have the recent background, if you understand what I'm saying, sort of the last year or 18 months or whatever.
When I say there's nothing interesting in them, it doesn't mean that we weren't doing anything at all. We were highly active. But I think it's what we're talking about now and going forward that's important. So will we go back and have a look? Catherine, do you have a...
Yeah, I mean, I think so the volume of reductions, and Amy will probably correct me, are very minor. So like about 95% of the minutes are unredacted. And I think a few reductions in my perspective, some of them were like to do with protecting people that might have been named. So there's other reasons why they might not be. But we'll go back and have another look.
Yes, that would be good.
And going forward, because of the decision to really proactively publish all the minutes, you'll see that there's fewer and fewer, and we're aiming for 0 reductions.
Yeah. Final question at that.
Right, I'll stand soon. My main concern is your IT systems. You're running several systems throughout the network of different organisations. So when you actually look to buy in software, you need to look at the transfer of data from one system to another system. So I know there's an issue with Rio on system 1, they can't talk to each other. So that's my concern.
I mean, I can just agree with System 1 or policy.
Well, it's probably the general point, isn't it?
I mean, as I said earlier, the digital strategy that we've got and the health system-led investment programme is about bringing people up to a consistent level to allow exactly that point for us to be able to freely share information across organisations and within systems. And from a CPFT point of view, we're currently out trying to procure an alternative to the existing Rio system, and one of the must-haves is the capability to do exactly as you were suggesting from a CPFT point of view.
You are running now, GPs are running different systems, aren't they? There are 4 systems they're running.
Yeah.
Are they compatible with each other? Can they transfer information?
Well, System 1 is a common system across general practice, and ourselves and CCS use that as well. But that's not the end point. The end point should be how do we share information irrespective of the actual application platform that's being used. And that's what interoperability tends to be the buzzword that's used.
Okay. So thank you, Scott. Thank you very much indeed. I do apologise to everyone, the person responsible for the church, for keeping meetings time. I think it doesn't really fair, so I'm sorry for that. But thank you in the sense it was trial and error, not trial and error, but working through how best to conduct it as kind of being public. But the assurance is we are having meetings in public. That's it. That is the way we will be. So our next meeting is in January. There's a brief business meeting and just 1 or 2 formalities that we may need to do as those around the board. But we will conduct that within 10 minutes and do that reasonably quickly. So can I just say thank you to members of the public for attending and your observations and your questions. So if we just come to this back up the break.